Dober večer, dober dan, dober večer. Good evening to everybody. I have the first bad news for you. The working language today is in English language. However, I know that somebody will start in Slovenian because a good Slovenian speaker. Thank you very much for coming and to answer our invitation. And I'm very pleased today as hosting institution, so as president of Slovenian pan-European movement, to have here with me two great experts of international relations. And you perfectly know on my right I have Igor Kovač, my vice president of the pan-European movement, also representative of the Regional Forum for International and Strategic Studies, Reformis. And on my left, Martin McDowell, that is the representative of the Embassy of United States of America, representing His Excellency, and also vodja oddelka za politične, gospodarske in trgovinske zadeve.
Na kratkem.
Na kratkem. Thank you very much also to the diplomats are present here in the hall today. And I'm going to make you a promise. I'm not going to speak a lot. Because I'm just a humble president of the pan-European movement today here, and I have two great experts that are going to discuss about one of the biggest, most important, wonderful issue for any geopolitical analyst in the world. That is, of course, the question of the new world order. I believe this is quite a huge topic, but I'm sure that the two guests will show us new points of view, opening us new perspectives, and also explaining us what they think will be, or if there will be, a new world order. I just take the occasion to be very short. I will speak for 30 minutes to introduce the topic. It's fine for you?
Yeah.
No, I will just start with one position. That is the position that I explain usually to my students, United States students, every year. Now, in the past, we had, during the Cold War, the bipolar or the Russia-US order. Then, for a while, a short period, if we take into account, of course, history, almost 20 or let's say at least 15 years, one big mega superpower order based on the order of United States of America. And now we are slowly moving to something else. Maybe yes, maybe no. This is the question for today, and this is the reason because we are here. There are few opinions around the world. One opinion is no, we are not moving. We are still under the superpower led by United States of America. We are moving to a new bipolar system where we will have China competition against the United States of America. Then we have also a nice theory, that is the theory that we will have a sort of international environment very close to the international environment would be we had after the Congress of Vienna. So many, few different powers, as it was at that time, 3 or 4 powers. And this is the theory where we have the United States of America, Europe, China, and Russia. Now, usually I explain to my students that that's quite an utopia, because European Union will never be a superpower, at least sic rebus stantibus today. My opinion, and here I leave the stage then to my guest, is that very likely we are going to have a situation in the future that is quite close to the situation that we had in the 19th century, where we had one power, that was the first one, so United Kingdom, the Great Britain, and a few powers as France, as Germany, as Russia. For sure, European Union, I do not consider now a pretendant of leadership in the world. For sure, as a partner in the West side, if the West side we consider United States of America, Europe, and maybe culturally linked also to Russia. So, but this is just an introduction to give the framework where we are, what kind of play we are going to play today, the game you are going to play today. And the occasion to be here today is also this book that, of course, Igor wrote a few months ago. And my first question to you, Igor, is why did you write this book?
Okay, thank you very much, Laris. First of all, I want to thank the organizers, a bunch of NGOs for organizing this round table. Secondly, I would like to thank you that came to this round table, especially my family, because it's probably their 23rd time listening to me present my point of view on the subject.
But they already prepared the questions, right?
Yes, yes. Good. Exactly. And I want to thank also Martin for agreeing to come and share this, to be with me on the panel with a no-namer like me. So thank you very much. And probably Martin will, when he will speak, he will start by saying the views and stands that I will present do not reflect the views and the stance of the State Department. Well, I wish I could say that, but something like that, but I cannot say something similar. And that's a good thing and that's a bad thing. The good thing is obvious because I have more academic freedom. The bad thing is that I cannot say that because I'm unemployed. So please buy the book. That's a commercial advertising for my book. 15 euros for students, 20 euros for working class. Right, now to get to the topic.
For the unemployed?
Pardon?
For the unemployed part?
For the unemployed, come to me, I will give you one. Yes. Now, let's go to business. I really like the title of today's panel because it sums up a really crucial issue that we are witnessing in the post-Cold War world. And that is mainly, are we witnessing a paradigmatic shift in the nature of international relations or not? Or are we just witnessing the rebalancing? I will give you an example or a similar point in history. 1815, what Laris already mentions, Vienna Congress. Remember the great debate that was among historians. Kissinger argued that the world is restored at 1815. However, Schroeder, another historian, argued no, the world was transformed. So basically, we are around 1990, we're witnessing a very similar question. Are we witnessing a new type of international relations, or are we just witnessing a new set of cards with a new poker table, but the game is the same? So to answer this question, I can give you an immediate answer. No, we're not witnessing any paradigmatic shift. We are just witnessing rebalancing. And I will then develop this thesis throughout my presentation. There were 2 points, crucial points, where we could talk about, or where the idea of a new paradigm was very, let's say, present in the politics and also in academia. And that was, as already mentioned, 1990. Remember, Berlin Wall came down, Slovenia got independent, also United States recognized us. So there was a big set of optimism there. Economy, democracy, peace would prevail. That was the idea. And well, throughout the 90s, this idea sort of faded away. And again, it emerged in 2008 with the economic financial crisis. That was an incentive, the crisis was an incentive to rethink the nature of international relations, to rethink how the international relations are conducted. Did we witness any paradigmatic change in 2008? I don't think so. And therefore, my argument is that it's just about rebalancing. So, to make along this introduction now more specific, so what has changed, let's say, from the Cold War international relations to contemporary international relations? I sketched a few points. Maybe I will skip some that will occur later on, but here are the crucial ones. One of the major superpowers, namely Soviet Union, collapsed. So again, immediately a question has risen. What about who is deterring USA? Or vice versa, who should USA contain now? So the whole nature of US foreign policy was put to the question. USA had to find a new, let's say, guiding principle how to conduct international relations. And remember the saying, I forgot which academic wrote that, but basically someone wrote that United States as a big knight slayed the dragon, and on the way back home got bitten by a poisonous snake in the wood. Mm-hmm. So so this was a big change. Second big change was, of course, the rise of the rest, so-called the rise of the rest. Remember, EU is formed in 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty, so a big new regional power. Remember, China starts its economic growth expediently in the early 90s and so on. So India, Brazil, we start to talk about BRICS later on in the 2000s. So the rise of the rest is the second big change in this world. A third point that I would like to make is asymmetric warfare. What is that? So basically, in the Cold War, we had wars, and we knew who's fighting whom. There were uniforms, there were known weapons, so everything was obvious. The enemy was obvious. Asymmetric warfare, basically what it sums up is that you don't know who the enemy is. Remember the Taliban, not only the Taliban, the terrorists in Afghanistan. They didn't have uniforms, they didn't had open weapons, their weapons were concealed. They played in a sort of guerrilla-style warfare. So how do you combat that? It's not a typical war. Again, basically the question for the United States. What happens, if the nature of the war changes? Another point regarding economy. In 1988, 90% of the transactions conducted in the world were primarily folded into the current account. So basically what that meant is that they were, let's say, the real side of the economy was behind them. In the 90s, what has changed today, what we're witnessing, that 99% of all transactions conducted today in the world are primarily folded in the capital account. These are short-term transactions, so what does that mean? So maybe somebody in the audience is familiar with Forex, maybe somebody is playing with that by his computer. Every 30 seconds, one clicks and makes a transaction, buys or sells certain currency. So the nature of economy completely changed let's say, in a decade. And regarding this, another point is geoeconomy. In 1990, Edward Luttwak, famous professor, comes up with a new term, geoeconomy, not geopolitics, geoeconomy. So what does he argues that economic relations became so important. Moreover, economic power factor becomes more important than military power factor. So therefore, economy is, let's say, the area where power relations will circulate around. Not the military or strategic, but economy. And in France, for instance, 6 months ago, I've just realized that in France, they actually established an academy for economic warfare. And I forgot the year, I think it was 2010, CIA conducted, it was Net Assessment, Office of Net Assessment in Pentagon, conducted a simulation about a full-scale attack on America, but not military attack, an economic, financial attack. Right, so these are, let's say, the major points that I think signify the changing nature of international relations from, let's say, 20, 25 years ago and today. And this change was very rapid. But now the main question, does these changes, these points that I've listed, do they make a paradigmatic shift? Did peace, democracy, economy prevail over, let's say, more strategic, hardcore power relations? Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you may prefer, no. The answer is no. Most of you probably know Fukuyama. He is one of the proponents of this, let's say, paradigmatic shift. He wrote a famous article in 1988 about the end of history and so on. Well, of course he had a major impact on policy, but throughout the 90s, already in Clinton years, United States sort of moved away from this hardcore Clinton idea, trade first. Remember, more than 300 trade agreements. Basically, on the 2 years that USA had the surplus in its budget in the 90s were Clinton years, and this didn't happen for, 3 decades, I believe. So it was economy, economy, economy. Another idea that occurred at the end of the Cold War was that the relations will not change paradigmatically, but only they will reshift towards the multipolar system. We all know what multipolarity means. John Mearsheimer, a famous professor, is a protagonist of this idea. And the third big idea that occurred around 1990 was the idea, of course, of unipolarity. The main protagonist, of course, Charles Krauthammer. So all these three big ideas had their impact in Bush's, so Bush the father, or George Howard Bush administration, and also on Clinton administration. But the biggest, let's say, problem is that issue is that United States did not follow neither of these big ideas. It was a sort of conglomerate. I can give you some, later on, I can give you some quotes from different people, from different institutions. For instance, Pentagon typically, let's say, is more, let's say, hawkish, so they will argue more in towards the unipolarity. Let's say State Department probably is more, hippie-ish. They will be more leaning towards more to Fukuyama or to Mearsheimer. So also when you look at the internal structure of the United States, you can see that different people, different agencies prefer different ideas. So in this conglomerate, United States was in a sort of labyrinth in the 90s with no clear vision. And therefore, because of its so to say, inactivity on the foreign policy, the world was multipolar. The world shifted from bipolarity in the Cold War to multipolarity in the 90s. And then came the 2000 elections. We all remember those. Some will argue that the person that won was didn't have the right to win because of Florida, blah, blah, blah. That's not the point. The main point is that the United States with Bush Jr. got the foreign policy vision. And it was put it very, very bluntly, in 2000, in the article in Foreign Affairs from Condoleezza Rice in the year 2000. Basically, she structured the vision of what United States foreign policy should be and what Republican administration will make it. And basically, they've done it. So, and the main point is that she writes, Russia and China are our, let's say, geopolitical, not enemies, but let's say...
You're an academic, you can.
Yeah, enemies. Right, thank you.
I think she said adversaries.
Adversaries, yeah. So, so the vision was clear. Unipolarity. United States has to do everything to secure its, it is the sole pole of power in the world. And then comes 9/11. Did it change anything systemically? No, it did not. It made the world even more unipolar. The reaction However, regarding the invasion to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and so on, are known to everyone. So the world was even more unipolar afterwards. However, there's a very interesting, a different spin to the events of the 9/11. That is the 2002 national security strategy of the United States. China and Russia are not there listed as adversaries, but they are listed as partners. Why? United States needs Russia and China for the stability of Central Asia. They figure out that if they cannot win the war on terror without these two big powers supporting them. And this was a very interesting moment that became even more obvious 4 years later. But I will get to that. An interesting point is also, if one recalls, a military strategy that was, I believe, formed also in 2002 and signifies the unipolarity, the vision for unipolarity of the United States. And this is the strategy called 1-4-2-1. And basically what it says, United States needs the capability to protect its homeland, that's one, fight 4 different wars at the same time in 4 different regions. 2 of them should be ended swiftly, with a victory, of course, and one conflict can America sustain can America stay there for a considerable period of time with a regime change and so on. So you can see how USA felt confident about its power. But then economy happened. Already in 2006, the level of high technology exports of the United States start going down. And if we look at them today, China has a bigger share of world's high technological exports than the United States. So, but already in 2006, the curve went down. That's one point. Second point, the United States got tangled up in Afghanistan and Iraq. Remember, the war was basically over in a month in both states, but it's a problem of keeping the peace. It's a problem of cultural understanding. There were problems of state building and peacekeeping, and the United States did not get the results it wanted. Many reasons why not, but it shows you that the United States wasn't at that point as powerful as it wanted to be. So, in 2006, I argue that the world shifted from unipolarity to unimultipolarity. This is a concept that was presented in 1999 by famous Professor Huntington, who's known for the clash of civilizations. However, in my mind, he is known for this thesis, his thesis on unimultipolarity. And basically he says, in the world, no one can do anything without the United States, and the United States alone cannot do anything without a certain amount of other powers supporting it. So this is why sort of fusion, unimultipolarity. And then comes 15th September 2008. What happened? Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And this is a sort of date that I think it's very symbolic because it shows you the extent of financial crisis that we are witnessing also today. And at that point, United States economy collapses, and therefore I also argue that the world went from unimultipolarity into non-polarity. Non-polarity is a concept that also occurred in 2008, was written by Professor Haas, also in an article in Foreign Affairs. And basically what Haas argues is that power is not only located within the states, but remember what I said earlier, the importance of economy and capital count. Power also moved sideward, shifted sideways, if I use the term from Susan Strange, towards the markets, towards the companies, financial institutions. Moreover, remember asymmetric warfare. Power shifted to insurgents. Remember geoeconomy. When we talk about geoeconomy, we cannot ignore IMF, World Bank, and other international organizations. Also, international organizations gain in its importance. So, Haas argues the world is not multipolar because the power in the world is so diffused that you cannot locate 5 powers, 6, 7, 10. It's everywhere. I mean, the amount of actors holding amount of power is so vast that you cannot say we are witnessing multipolarity, but it's a non-polar world. So in this non-polar world, and this is where I will conclude now. A short introduction, yes. So we got a new president, Obama, who spared a lot of hope, not only in the States, also across the world. Remember, he gained Nobel Peace Prize. What happened? Well, one of my professors, Professor Rowe, at the Diplomatic Academy, once said, Obama is Bush light. And he's quite right. What has changed? President Obama uses more drone strikes than President Bush ever did, so no change in, let's say, defense or military policy. If we look at economic policy, again, no change there, quantitative easing all the way, no structural change of the economy that was promised. Maybe we can get into the numbers later on. If we look at the foreign policy, maybe there we can witness a certain change, but definitely not a change in terms of paradigmatic shift, but only a change in terms of rebalancing. Where did Madam Clinton first travel? Her first travel was towards Asia, but I have to stress that first travel of Foreign Minister Kerry was to Europe. But there's no doubt that the Obama administration put Asia and China on the top of their list of priorities. So we can see, because of this priority list, we can see let's say, that the world is sort of in a rebalancing state. So this is where I conclude.
Igor, thank you very much for your really brief introduction to the questions. I have already a lot of questions, a lot of suggestions, and I'm not going now to burden you. But however, you are representing here today, around this table at least, the only superpower. So given that Pan-Europa is not a superpower, you are representing a superpower. And guessing a little bit, you, as United States of America, you have a good track record of won wars until the Second World War. But after that, so-so. But however, any international environment is always based on the outputs of a big, important war. And our international environments, our international institutions still today, are institutions coming out from the Second World War. What has been shaped by Stalin, by Churchill, and by Roosevelt. Well, where we are today. The questions later on.
Ja. Hvala, Laris. In Igor, in kako Laris je rekao, prvič v imenu veleposlanika, v imenu Veleposlaništva, hvala lepa za vabilo. With that, I would like to switch over to English for all of our non-Slovene speakers who are also present today in the audience. But I'd be happy. Yeah. Well, rad bi razgovaroval tudi z vami na slovenskom, na dolgo. And if anybody has any questions and they would feel more comfortable talking to me in Slovene, potem ni problema, lako. You know, this is an interesting, of course, theme and topic. We're very happy to be able to participate. Thank you again for inviting us. on the official side, and as Igor said, I mean, I think I can speak to you of two minds. We can talk a little bit about policy, because that's, I think, what the first thing everybody wants to hear. They want to hear, what is Washington thinking about this, and what is the White House thinking about this? And then we can get into, I think, a more interesting debate and hopefully open it up to the floor, because I hope everybody came tonight not just to listen, but also to ask questions. And that's actually going to make for a more interesting discussion, I think, if we can get to your questions as well. I think the very short answer is, if we want to talk about what happened after World War II, maybe what went wrong. Is there a unipolar or a multipolar world? Was there some kind of big paradigmatic shift, as Igor mentioned? The truth is that, and I think we see this in reality, is that every administration, be it Democratic or Republican, for a long time, essentially doesn't have the time to kind of contemplate these big answers, and these big questions, the philosophical questions. They have people, of course, who are advising them and who are pondering these big questions. But the reality is that, politicians, at the end of the day, administrations, react to what the voters want and what the voters care about. And voters maybe not necessarily are not interested in whether or not there's a new world order is taking shape. They're concerned about how is their pocketbook being affected. They're worried about, are they safe at home? They're concerned about what we call bread and butter, pocketbook matters. And the way that the world has changed, and the way the nature of the challenges themselves have changed, as Igor alluded to earlier, has meant that each administration has more or less had to be more and more reactive. It's been much more difficult to be strategic, because even predicting the nature of the challenges themselves has proven more difficult. To talk about whether or not there is a new world orders, I think from the policy viewpoint of the United States, are kind of like beauty. I mean, they're going to be in the eye of the beholder. Experts, and by the way, Colin Powell, if we want to talk about experts, he said, be careful about experts because they often have more data than judgment. Present company accepted tonight, of course, is that, people are going to draw their own conclusions. And I think actually largely, I'm in agreement with a lot of things that Igor talked about in terms of these different phenomena. As he mentioned, there were things happening on the economic front. There were things happening on the political front. And frankly, I think our view is that the Cold War world as such didn't necessarily evolve as it did because of any desire by the U.S. to suddenly divide the world in half. I mean, we all know the history of how things happen and how this basically antagonistic relationship between the Soviet Union and the U.S. developed out of what were essentially allies coming out of the Second World War. And people had to react to that. And we quickly found out through Korea, for example, that, again, and I think we had to give some credit to Wilson also, and not just Roosevelt and Churchill and Stalin, is that the best way to try and attack some of these problems was to get as many countries on board as you can. Let's do this together. And if anything, if we want to talk about lessons that the U.S. learned, for example, from Afghanistan, I think we've seen that unless we are able to try to deal with threats in a way that in fact affect all of us, there's no way any one nation can be successful in today's challenges. The world is too big, the challenges are moving too fast, changing too quickly. So actually, the things that we're focused on today is not what new order is maybe evolving out of this and how can the U.S. best position itself to make sure that we're somehow on top. We're more focused on the question of how are we going to work together, no matter where you view yourself in that order, what kind of order you perceive, how are we going to face the challenges that are out there today. And actually I can bring you some good news because just last week, the World Bank, if we want to talk about numbers and data, right? World Bank said that actually global poverty fell to 21%, and that's half of the poverty rate of 1990 over the period of 2011. Now keep in mind, that's while we've had these ongoing messes, frankly, in Afghanistan, and still the leftover mess of Iraq, and then the other changes that happened out of the so-called Arab Spring in the Middle East. So even during all that time, there were other improvements as well in terms of primary education enrollment for girls. And again, these things didn't happen because of anything that any one global superpower was doing. Of course, the USAID is partnered with Slovenia and a lot of other countries through the Millennium Challenge goals. and we are giving a lot of financial support toward these. But again, it's too great for any one country to meet on their own. Global food security, health, of course, climate change, gender equity. Again, these are global issues and it's global challenges. So I think and this is a rather short way of saying, and we could talk more about the very specifics, I think, of how the U.S. reacted to or adapted to a certain situation and whether we did a good job of it or not. It's basically, our conclusion is there are a number of challenges, we have to focus on them, and we can't do it by ourselves. We need help, and we have to tackle them together.
Martin, thanks for your diplomatic introduction. But now
someone has a chetko, right?
Yeah, someone has a chetko. But now we are warming up, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so however, I believe that Igor opened a wonderful topic, but of course, unfortunately, also my topic, that is the geoeconomy. And now I'm going to ask you something very directly, and in a provocative way. I have I'm a lucky guy. I have a lot of vice presidents in the pan-European movement, and Igor is one of my vice presidents. And I'm lucky because it's not needed to be always to agree always on one topic, on one matter. And I have to say that I do not agree with Igor on the no polarity. Yes, it's true. There are a lot of different, how you can say, powerful centers around the world. The power is distributed, the power is spread around the financial world, the nations, the states, the governments, international organizations, and so on. That's absolutely perfect. But however, United States of America, and few among this international elite have more power. And more power, it means also more power in economy. And more power in economy, it means that you have more power also to shape the world on the point of the geoeconomy. And now, given that France has this école de guerre économique, let's say, if France moves war against you with all the powerful intelligence and economy and financial world led by the call for the guerre économique against you, are you going to survive, or are you using already today the same means and the same tools? What is happening now from the financial point of view in the world? Are you leading this or you're not?
Oh, that's an excellent question, Laris. Probably a lot of you remember during the Cold War, people talked about MAD a lot, or mutually assured destruction. And I think that today, when people like to talk about what's going to happen in let's say if there is an economic conflict, or what's happening in this adversarial, if you will, at least in economic terms, relationship between China and the West, or at least China and the United States, we would like to use the term monetarily assured destruction. And what I mean by that is that while everybody wants to win and everybody wants to do well, and you want your companies to succeed and you want your products to be sold and dominate the market, the fact is we are interconnected today more than ever. Sometimes that interconnectedness can hurt us. In fact, we saw what happened in the build-up to the 2008 economic crisis, where basically the U.S. was financing its relationship with China, basically saying, you keep buying up our debt and we'll make sure there's a market for your exports. Well, that only got us so far, right? And now there is a rebalancing taking place, to borrow the word that Igor would use. But I would keep in mind, it's interesting that you raise Europe. I mean, Europe far and away remains and will be, on the foreseeable horizon, outside of the Western Hemisphere, our most important and key economic power. And just keep in mind that the US and the EU together already account for half of the global economic output and 1/3 of trade all around the world. I think sometimes when we are too focused on Asia, we forget, those basic facts. There's a reason why things are the way they are, and when you're in a good position economically, I mean, we can talk maybe about sheer numbers. You mentioned earlier the number of technological experts in China. Well, I mean, we could get into a debate, I guess, like what kind of experts are we talking about? What fields are they working in? What are they doing with that brain power and that talent? So are we going to compete? Yes. I mean, actually, competition is healthy. I mean, there was a lot of talk in 2008 about the end of capitalism and the death of capitalism. But, you know, our view is that capitalism works best when people are open to competition. And when there's a level playing field, when people compete, you know, and we lose, at the end of the day, we're also ready to concede that. You know, we're okay to be, as we call it, a good loser. If somebody can do better than we can and sell a better product at a better price, right? That's how the game is played.
Thank you very much. Less diplomatic answer, very good. Yeah. Fair enough, thank you, I like it. Now a question to you, Igor. I would like to recall a little bit what you have said about China and Russia as partners for the United States of America. Now, you know, let's be once again provocative. Yeah, it's true. China and Russia officially as partners of the United States of America. Nice. But this is in a sort of way that China and Russia partners, and the more they are partners, the more they are enemies between themselves. It's a sort of divide et impera.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Well, several points that I think
another short introduction.
Another short introduction. No, just to pick up where Martin left about U.S. and EU relations with, I mean China and EU relations with U.S. Trade data from 2011. U.S.-China trade summed up with at 300,000 million. However, U.S.-EU trade summed up at 637,000 million dollars. So you can see basically 100% more EU trades with US than China. Of course, the rise of the trade is immensely in the favor of China, but the absolute data is on the side of EU. Now, when it comes to Russia and China, are they partners or not? There was recently, I think 4 months ago, there was a great article in Foreign Affairs saying that BRICS are falling apart. And then, about 2 months ago, BRICS announced they will establish the International Bank. So there's quite a big ambiguity regarding that. Firstly, Russia sees, I think, China as a sort of gift with which it teases EU. Basically, Russia never knows that the biggest threat for Russia comes from China. Remember the data about the population. Russians are moving out of the Far East. Chinese are moving in. They face a big demographic pressure. And Russia is aware of that. If Russia supports China in terms of energy, in terms of military, weapon deals and so on, it will be its own demise, destruction. Russia does not want that. Russia perceives itself always as a sort of superior towards the other Asian nations. Whenever Chinese delegation comes to Moscow, they always have to wait one day to meet with President Putin, which in diplomatic sense means you will wait for me quite a long. And this is the point that I want to make. Russia is sort of teasing EU with China. EU, look, we have here somebody that will buy our military equipment. Remember, Russia is the second largest military export in the world after the United States. EU, look, we have somebody that will buy our weapons, that will buy our energy, our gas, our oil. If you don't buy, we will sell it to them. And What does that mean? That China gets even more powerful. It gets the resources it needs, and of course it can put also pressure on EU on a different scale. So the question is actually relations between Russia and China is actually the question between what are the relations between EU and Russia. And here I must say that again, United States comes into play as a sort of big brother of EU. When Soviet Union collapsed, Kuziro was the foreign minister Kuziro was the foreign minister of Russia at that point, and he asked for NATO membership. Which, of course, immediately USA declined. And then remember, in the end of the 90s and early 2000s, United States penetrated the Russian geopolitical sphere. Central Asia, the Caucasus. Remember the war in 2008, right, in Georgia? Why was that there? The question of Georgia going into NATO or not, and so on. Let's not go into details, but the point is, Russian bear is back. It is standing on its 2 feet, and we have to consider it as such. All that Russia wants is to be treated respectfully and on the same level, not to be looked down upon. This is sort of Russia's pride. And I believe that EU and United States can benefit a lot if they follow this policy. And to conclude, again, a very short introduction. When I was working at the OSCE in 2010, there was a very good initiative called the Corfu process. Unfortunately, it died out. Basically, what it said was a sort of reform of the function of OSCE, how it should function, and basically how to get a new security structure for Europe, where Russia, EU countries, or European countries, and also United States would be partners on the same level. Because in NATO-Russia Council, they're not partners on the same level. It's NATO and Russia. And in OSCE, they are equal. So this is the only institution where, let's say, this bringing Russia towards the West can happen. And unfortunately, I think we missed the opportunity there in 2010.
Thank you very much, Igor. Perfect. Now, let's make it even more interesting, given that we have a guest here from the Embassy of Japan. Let's start with another topic. Well, it's connected, of course. But, however, I'm not an expert of geopolitics. I'm just a humble scholar. But I moved many times a strong critic to the United States of America in the last 4 years concerning the behavior toward the Euro-Mediterranean region. At once, it was the feeling here in the Euro-Mediterranean region that you completely forgot about us, and that you moved completely, you pivot to Asia. So you shifted toward the Pacific, and that you are very strongly concentrated only on facts and problems and issues connected with China, Japan, North, South Korea, Taiwan, all that region. Now, of course, you changed slightly now in the second, at the beginning of the second mandate of Obama. But however, of course, we agree. There is something going on in the Pacific region. So what is going on? And given that the first secretary of the Japan embassy is here, well, I believe to be quite direct, you are also responsible for their security, right? So your presence there is very important, but also your presence here in the Mediterranean region is very important because, however, everything is connected with the Euro-Mediterranean region. What is going on?
Wow, there's a lot of stuff there. Even like going back to some things Igor said, but let's take them in order then. I think maybe Akahito would back me up on this. That a lot of people like to talk about the so-called Asia pivot of the United States, especially in the last 4 years. The thing is, if you went to the Asian countries, not just 4 years ago, but even today, they are saying, where were you before 2008, right? In their view, the quote-unquote pivot is like long overdue, actually. You know, they're like, you guys have been extremely focused across the Atlantic, more so than maybe you should have been. And don't forget, and actually if we look at the trade numbers, you can see that the U.S. is the second, sometimes the third, but many times even the biggest trading partner of many of those countries which are right next door to China. And that's, again, there's a reason why. Historically, a lot of ties, a lot of strong relationships going back last 40, 50, 60 years. And to be honest, I mean, a lot of our friends and allies there in the region, and absolutely Japan is among our closest friends, not just in the world, but certainly in the region, and we feel a certain amount of responsibility to make sure that our friends feel safe and secure. Frankly, they've been waiting, and they feel this amount of attention is long overdue. So I just want to lay that point down, number one, when we talk about the pivot. That being said, of course, Europe is, you know, among our closest friends and allies as well. And it's kind of like if you have two best friends and you're trying to keep them both happy, and one is texting you and the other one's calling you on the home phone, and they both want you to come over. So it's that kind of a situation. But going back to the idea of like partnership versus adversaries, I mean, honestly, it is a bit of a dichotomy in this relationship. If we want to talk about with the BRICS, with China, with Russia, if you want to talk about, are there, you know, yes, we're partners for all those, you know, issues that I just talked about, which are now global challenges. We have to be partners. I mean, we're all forced to be partners now, essentially, to one degree or another. Does that mean we always get along and agree with each other on everything? You don't have to look much further past the UN Security Council to figure out, well, actually, no, we don't agree on everything. Just look what is happening in Syria right now, and you discover that, yes, actually, we can't agree on the way forward, and even actually what we all think is happening there right now. So those present challenges. You know, among my previous assignments, I was in Moldova for 3 years, and I've seen firsthand that Russia doesn't act simply out of pride. They act however they believe their interests are. And when Russia believes that if it's in their interest for other countries to be in a weaker position than Russia, then they'll do everything they can to make sure those countries are in that situation. That's my personal view now. That's not the view of the U.S. But as I said, I was there for 3 years, and there's a reason why the so-called frozen conflicts are still frozen. Right.
Thank you very much. Last question for both, and then we can open the floor, right? I agree?
Yeah.
Good, very nice. My question was something that is linked, is more I can say a curiosity. How do you see this topic? And it is the asymmetric warfare. Well, it's new. Well, it is not new. Asymmetric warfare is already known from the past, from the history. We have great books about asymmetric war, Che Guevara, for example, Mao Zedong. Also, the asymmetric war is the partisan war in Yugoslavia, in Italy, in France. And usually, if the asymmetric war is done in the right environment, then it's a winning war. It's impossible to defeat an asymmetric war in the right environment with a normal war, with a symmetric war. But you're right, Igor. In the past, it was clear who was the enemy. However, also in an asymmetric war, for example, let's say in Cuba, well, the enemy was clear, and Che Guevara and Fidel Castro was on another side. In the partisan war, it was clear the enemy was in front of you. Now it's different. Now in this asymmetric war, something changed. The enemy is not a typical enemy. That's correct. So what is going on? What is happening? how we can contrast this kind of war. Because this is really the difference, not the kind of war, but the enemy, right? Just open to you, to your comments.
Well, it's a very hard question, actually, Laris.
I know.
There's an aspect that we haven't touched upon, actually.
Please.
Cyber war.
Please.
And it goes basically hand in hand with what you said. With one click of a button, you can basically ruin a whole state. Remember, was it 2007 Russian attack on Estonia? I think it was 2007 or 2008.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or just recently, Israel attack on Iranian nuclear power plant, and so on. So asymmetric war, when it comes, firstly, let's say combatants. No, the Che Guevara wore a uniform. He had a gun pointed at you if you were his enemy.
Yeah, right.
Terrorists in Baghdad, they don't wear uniforms. They have their bombs under their coats. They explode. And there's very hard how to combat that, how to deal with it. And I agree with you, Laris, it's practically impossible. We just saw that recently in Boston. And at this point, I just would like to express my condolences to the families and also to the whole United States. I have family also in the United States, and of course, one is terrified about that. But Tony Blair once said, if they change our way of life, then they have won. So he said it something like that. And basically, he's absolutely right. You can win asymmetric warfare if democracy, freedom, and strive for peace lose. So, but watch out, you will lose also if you overreact. And this is also the case what happened after 9/11, also what is going on today in the United States. A bit of overreaction, infringement upon the basic human rights and so on. United States was founded on the principle of human rights. EU stands for that. So we have to be very careful. We will defeat the terrorists and the radicalists with not changing, not fearing. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. Did you overreact?
I would say officially, of course, this is a question which is still being debated and discussed. Personally, I wouldn't be in the business I'm in. I wouldn't be doing the job that I'm in if I thought there wasn't sense in trying to resolve things peacefully and talking to people, right? I would be in a different profession. So I would say in the very short term after 9/11, I don't believe we overreacted. I think that's why you saw that we had not just the sympathy, but the support of the world on the side of all those countries that went into Afghanistan with us to take down people who were basically had trained and supported a group of people to do one thing, and that was to go overseas and kill innocent people. More than 3,000 people, citizens of dozens of countries from around the world, not just the United States. What happened in Iraq, I think, was a different matter. And it's unfortunate that happened because ever since then it's been nothing but a distraction from the real issues that happened beforehand. But again, that's my personal view. In terms of warfare overall and how to combat what's happening, I mean, I can tell you as someone who had the privilege to actually go to the War College of the U.S. Army in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. This is a question which is being debated and discussed. Is the nature of warfare itself changing, or to quote Fallout, does war never change? And it's actually simply the people who are adapting and trying to come up with some new methods depending on their personal situation. My view is it's actually a little bit of both, because of things like cyber warfare. I mean, that's a scale that none of our great writers, Sun Tzu and others, couldn't have envisioned that, but they did talk about the very basic things of in the nature of conflict, and because we're all human beings on one level, there are going to be certain universal truths. And that brings me to my final point, and that is that it's not so much, a question of how do we combat this threat and how do we defeat it? Because, as Laris said, there are certain threats that actually we never can defeat. I mean, and that's sadly one of the things that Boston reminded us of again, that if people want to hurt us, unfortunately, you can always find a way to hurt people unless we're going to give up the war and change our ways and live in locked boxes the rest of our lives. Instead, we have to address the causes. We have to get to the root of what's driving people to this kind of desperation, what's driving people into the arms of people who can basically manipulate them to where they're willing to do things like that. And if we don't get at those causes and solve those problems, I'm afraid we're going to find ourselves in this situation for many years to come.
Thank you very much, Martin. So, only one my comment about cyber war and asymmetric war. I would like to quote the General Schwarzkopf.
Norman.
Yeah, right. He said once, if you want to win a war, you must invade. There is no other way. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we remain without ideas. We do not have any more topics. So I would like to open the floor to questions, comments. Join us in this discussion, please, because I believe that it's quite interesting and full of ideas. Be brave. Bravo.
Spomnil sem si to, kar je Igor v referatu zaključil, da je pač ameriška administracija se zdaj osredotočila na Azijo in Kitajsko. To se je izkazalo tudi v zadnji predsedniški kampanji. Moje vprašanje je, ali je to, kar se zdaj dogaja v Severni Koreji, pač to, da hoče država s temi dejanji pozornost usmeriti za to, da rešuje notranje probleme, ali je to dejansko nevarnost za svetovni mir?
Yeah, I will answer in English. Is that okay? About North Korea. Well, firstly, I would like to just point out a quote from the late Senator Tsongas from the United States, who at the end of the Cold War said, "The Cold War is over, Japan won." I wanted to say that. I wanted to say that earlier, but I think this is the right moment. That in two ways. One, the, let's say, economic rise of Japan didn't happen in the 90s. Actually, it struggled, but China took over, and of course, United States, as it is a big partner with Japan, also started a big partnership with China, but it was quite pragmatic, because China, although it entered the WTO in 2001, still does not comply with the rules with WTO. And one thing that Obama administration in the campaign that you mentioned, Obama several times pointed out that United States filed a lot of complaints at the appellate body at the WTO. Mm. So let's say partnerships, yes, with US and China, but US is beginning to be aware that if it is not very, very active to level the playing field, it will lose in this partnership. When it comes to North Korea, I think the answer is very simple. You don't have anything to fear. I don't think there will be any attack. One of the misperceptions is that the North Korean regime is a bit wacko, a bit crazy. I think they are very pragmatic. They know that if they start a war, it will end bad, and it would end bad for them. It will be the end of their regime. What they want to do, I believe, is blackmail the international community as they did before. Remember that I believe it was in during the Bush administration, when North Korea stepped out of the agreement and then blackmailed the international community for food, for national resources, energy resources, and so on. So I believe the idea in the North Korean regime is similar this time. They wish to blackmail the international community for certain benefits. They're not stupid enough to go to do anything serious. So I don't think we have anything to fear about. Mm-hmm. Saying that, the North Korean regime, nor the Iranian regime for the matter, I believe, are not stupid enough to use nuclear or chemical weapons. The only thing that we have to be careful about is that these weapons, chemical, nuclear, or so weapons of mass destruction, they don't come into the hands of, let's say, certain ideological extremists. Yeah. It's enough, one dirty bomb, it's enough for the whole Ljubljana. So, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Hvala za vprašanje. I think on the question of the pivot, I already talked about that earlier in my remarks. As far as North Korea goes, I agree with everything that Igor just said. That basically this is nothing new. If you look back, there's a history of behavior in North Korea that this is essentially for. It's two parts. It's one, domestically focused internally. You know, they've got a new leader who's very young, essentially inexperienced, wasn't unknown. He's eager to establish himself inside the country. And then externally, yes, they're hoping for a lot more carrot and a lot less stick. Yeah. And actually, if we want to talk about partnership with Russia and China, in dealing with North Korea, they have a key and a unique position, because North Korea would not be where it is today and able to do the things that it can do if it were not for Russia and China. So Russia and China need to get on board and help us make sure that North Korea understands what the real situation is. And when you want to talk about WTO, just, you know, a lot of people were against, even in the United States, against China getting into WTO. The level playing field that you mentioned, that's exactly why we said it was in our interest, not just ours, but the world's interest, to bring China in, because now we have a mechanism to make China play fair.
Thank you very much. I would like just to add one point on this question. I completely agree with Igor and with Martin. It is a blackmail. It's a clear blackmail for the international environment. But yes, for sure, the young leader must stabilize the image inside, and to show that he is crazy enough to start a war outside. It is more or less like what was Brezhnev, right, with the show, right, in the United Nations. Khrushchev, right? Sorry, Khrushchev. It's the same way of doing, in order to create panic. But what I'm scared about is, if you remember, a few days ago, a week ago, there was a short movie circulating among the news, TV news, that was this young leader that was not able even to manage a gun. Do you remember this image? That's quite strange. That's quite strange. I'm scared about that, because if he is really so crazy and is really unable, then we maybe are close to something that is not so good. Yeah. But this image is this movie was really scary movie. It was really like a gun in this way.
Yeah, I think Dennis Rodman is a bigger threat.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Another one.
Of trying to take the floor, but anyway, I must say I really like the point that you made, Mr. McDowell, about the asymmetric warfare. That we must look into the reasons why people are propelled to take such actions. But I'd like to go a bit further and combine. We have to bear in mind that asymmetric warfare is combined with cyber warfare and, of course, with economic warfare. On all these aspects that can be combined, especially, I would like to stress among these the economic warfare. How, in this sense, should the US and the EU, to take the position of two powers, how should they prepare for economic warfare with bearing in mind the possibilities of asymmetric attacks and cyber attacks within this scope, within the scope of economic warfare? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, a great question. Thank you. That was a good recovery. No, look, this is a good point. I mentioned earlier the War College and some of these questions that the brain trusts are kind of pondering. And one of the things I think that's being discussed a lot today, and rightly so, is the idea of kind of total warfare and the use of all the tools that we have in our toolbox. Secretary Clinton liked to use that expression a lot. But actually, the hippies, quote unquote, at the State Department, like that when people remember that in theory we should have some role in foreign policy formulation and not just implementation, and that you have to look at all those things, and we hope that our policymakers are. So in addition to considering how diplomacy, how traditional conventional warfare, how other issues can be used, they should also be looking at economic warfare, but primarily in terms, let's say, at least right now, in terms of cybersecurity. And I think probably most people who are aware that, just recently at the Pentagon, there was a whole new kind of, let's say, wing of the Pentagon that was opened up that's now focused principally on this issue. And it's not because by accident. I mean, there have been an increasing number, and I think Igor alluded to this earlier, of cyber attacks. I don't have to mention right now who we think there are certain countries that are interested in financing cyber attacks, not necessarily because they themselves, let's say, think they can profit by it, but it's simply trying to probe, weaknesses, where are the vulnerabilities, so that if ever there was a day when someone decided they wanted to exploit those weaknesses, they would know how to do it. They would know where your weak spots are. And that is a very interesting game. It's kind of like a game, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, called Battleship in the States. And that's where basically you have two players moving their ships, and neither player can see where their ships are positioned. You only find out by basically probing your enemy's defenses and launching attacks. And cyber warfare is kind of the same. It operates on the same kinds of principles. So is it something that we're thinking about? Absolutely. Is it something that we're fully prepared for or ever can be fully prepared for? Personally, I think that's impossible for all the reasons that I was talking about earlier, because as the natures of the threats, the challenges themselves are evolving and changing. And Lord knows, on the internet and in the cyber sphere, that's where they're changing the most rapidly. It's impossible to anticipate everything.
Yeah, well, regarding economics tools for pressure, there's one very good example today, and this is Iran. International community, by that I mean the EU, the United States put enormous amount, I would rather say financial pressure on Iran, because their currency is plummeting, they cannot export. So there are some signs of cracking, yet in the negotiations that are taking place in Kazakhstan, currently periodically every month I believe, there has not been any breakthrough yet. But Iran is under enormous amount of economic pressure due to us on the West. And I will just give you another example. Also Slovenia, I believe, has signed that Iranian airplanes must not refuel in our airports. However, a couple of weeks ago, I have seen an Iranian plane.
It was a joke.
It was, pardon?
Iran Air.
Yeah, it was here. So apparently we didn't obey the rules that we have signed to. But maybe it's a bigger economic strategy behind it that I'm not aware of. But regarding the EU dealing with the threats, the new threats, the asymmetric war, the economic warfare, the cyber war, for starters, we need a serious EU. Where is EU? And this is saying as a pan-European. Great, we have the president of European Council, we have our foreign minister, Baroness, and so on. But I'm sorry, I still do not see a political head of the European Union. By that, I mean an institution or a person that will give credibility to the EU, that will give a vision to the EU. We don't have European politicians. We don't have European leaders. This is one. Number one, if we solve this problem, then other things are peanuts. There are solutions how to do that because states already are doing that. I mentioned France, in the early stages of the debate, what France is doing with the Academy for Economic Warfare and so on. So states are aware of that. But every state on its own in EU doesn't matter anything on the world chessboard. Only if EU acts as united actor can have a wished results. And for that we need politicians, European politicians with a vision.
You can assert economic pressure if you have the upper hand. And only if you have the upper hand. You mentioned the example of Iran. You can do that with Iran, with the international community exerting pressure and so on. But let's say a hypothetical case of China going mad and doing something wrong that would propel the West to wage economic war against China. Normal forms of economic pressure would not apply here probably. And the other remark I wanted to say, yes, Igor, definitely the EU lacks perspective, lacks vision, and real steps towards uniting and towards unification and working together in such important matters. As you said, a single state like France, even if it's France, that is quite big, cannot economic war against a serious economic war if under a strong attack. But on the other hand, other European countries, for example, Slovenia, can be under an economic attack, which what we are witnessing today could be called an economic attack on Slovenia. So yeah.
Yeah, good questions. I think in terms of an economic conflicts with China, I mentioned earlier the monetarily assured destruction. Yeah. I mean today, it would hypothetically anything can happen, right? I mean it's hard to imagine right now the scenario how that would happen because it would be so damaging to both countries. I think a lot of things would have to happen for things to get so bad. And hopefully, moramo klepati that won't happen, right? But you mentioned earlier, we were talking about like the root causes, for example, of terrorism. When you talk about sanctions regimes, there are two big problems that present themselves immediately. One is, how do you hurt the regime but not hurt the people who may or may not support the regime? Or even in the case of Iran, I think a lot of them, how much are they even aware of kind of what's going on outside Iran and how the international community perceives things that they're doing and the things that the regime is actually doing in the name of the People's Islamic Republic, right? So that's a problem. The other problem is, these sanction regimes really only work when you get everybody to buy in and support them. And unfortunately, in many, many cases, including Iran, there are some countries who have basically chosen to choose profit over the good of the Iranian people and over the will of the international community. And they see that when other people leave, that presents an interesting market opportunity and they exploit it. And that's a pattern that we've seen repeated time and again. And unfortunately, as long as those loopholes are there, it undermines how effective those regimes can be.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I don't think it's hypothetically possible. It's a reality that China is doing economic warfare. It's already doing it with pegging its currency to the US dollar. It's a sort of, it's an economic tool in economic warfare. Furthermore, I'll give you some data. In the year 2000, 90% of Chinese debt was long-term debt. So that means it could become a structural problem. But in 2010, the long-term debt, China reduced to only 37% of its debt. So what that means is that China made a sort of security protection, reducing its long-term debt. And another economic warfare is, of course, buying US bonds. Of course, it serves the Chinese exports and so on, but it's also a tool by which China holds United States. 25% of the US foreign debt is owned by China. EU, on the other hand, if you combine the percentage owned by EU member states of the US foreign debt, is 15%. So we're not that far from Chinese altogether. But still, my point is, economic warfare is already going on. China is pursuing it, and we are pursuing it as well. So is US, France, Italy, Germany, I hope also Slovenia, because we need to understand what's the nature of the game and we have to play it. The question is, of course, efficiency. How efficient are you? Can Iran play the economic warfare? Of course it can. Will the results be efficient? Will the results be there? Well, I don't know. Hard.
I just want to respond to just a couple of things real quick. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define warfare, right? I mean, my view is you can always throw a term out there, and it can help you sell a newspaper or maybe get a book published. But it doesn't necessarily reflect reality. Are we in competition with each other? Absolutely. And purchasing American debt is definitely a good economic tactic. Fortunately, it's one that also has a benefit for our economy because, as I alluded to earlier, we've really overextended ourselves in terms of our own current account deficit, in terms of our own debt, and that's still a problem, as it's no secret to anyone here, that we're struggling with. But I think that competition, which again has negative sides but also benefits, is very different than our relationship with Iran and what the international community is trying to establish there. And in terms of cybersecurity, I forgot to mention also that we are doing things, we are reacting. After this attack that happened in Estonia, the one that Igor mentioned earlier, NATO established a cyber center for excellence in Estonia, and today all of our allies, including Slovenia, are going there and we're doing training. So we are trying to do some things in a coordinated manner. We are trying to plan for some things.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, unbelievable. 1 hour and a half passed. We are today guests here in Slovenska Matica for free. But, however, panevropsko gibanje, Slovenian pan-European movement is how you can say, poor, is so poor that we have even no money to pay 5 minutes more of this free possibility to stay here in Slovenska Matica. So we are going to conclude, to end, to finish this hour roundtable. I really enjoyed a lot. Thank you very much to Igor and to Martin for coming. I believe that, of course, it was a broad discussion, but it was a nice discussion. It was not a normal diplomatic standard discussion. I appreciate really very much your effort, so thank you very much. Now it's on you to buy the book, of course. The working class, right?
Yeah,
right. And please, I just extend the invitation to join our next roundtable, May the 7th. We still do not have all the details of the roundtable. It's very likely it will be in the Slovenska SAZU. Thank you very much. However, very shortly we will be informed about the details and the location and also the the time. So so far, thank you very much. I really enjoyed. Good discussion, good ideas, good points of view, and see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.